Mr. Semerstein, you worked at the Steelton Police Department for a number of years, right?
I worked at the Steelton Police Department for 8 years with distinction.
But you've only worked as a security guard for 2 years before that.
I worked as a security guard before becoming a police officer. I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as only. It was something that I did, and then I went to the police academy and became a police officer, so that way I could serve my community.
But to answer my question, you were a security guard for only 2 years.
I take exception to the only characterization of the time I spent as a security guard.
And Mr. Semerstein, you were asked to review all materials and the depositions and exhibits in this case.
I was asked to review certain materials that would help me prepare my opinion, yes.
And you actually looked at all these materials, correct?
I reviewed them, yes.
You are familiar with this game, Chase 'em.
To the extent that it applies to what happened to Mr. Daly, yes, I am familiar with it.
And you are aware that it's popular amongst young children and young adults?
I believe that it is a popular game, yes.
And you know from your review of the materials that the plaintiff played this game?
Yes, he did.
On June 6th, 2015, the plaintiff specifically was at Mr. Simon's ice cream parlor.
Between the hours of 8 o'clock and 10:45, Mr. Daly was at the defendant's ice cream parlor, and then at that point he was attacked as a result of failed attempts to keep him safe.
Right, but he was at the parlor that evening on June 6th, correct?
It was the evening of June 6th that he was attacked.
And
Yes,
the
that's
ice cream
correct.
parlor was advertised as a Chase place, is that correct?
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to be more specific.
The ice cream parlor, Mr. Simon's ice cream shop, was advertised as a chase place for people who play Chase 'em to go there and catch these rare monsters
By whom?
by Mr. Simon.
All right, so yes, the defendant did have an advertisement that they were a Chase place. I just want to be specific because Chase 'em is not owned by the defendant, and of course they were not advertising it specifically.
But an individual can go there to play the game Chase 'em and catch these rare monsters.
There was a Chase place located on the defendant's property, yes.
And from your review of the materials, you were aware that Mr. Simon's ice cream parlor closed at 10 p.m.
I know that that night they closed at 10 p.m.
Now, after
There
10
was
o'clock.
There was no advertisement or postings of their scheduled time closing.
But from your review, you know that Scooter's ice cream parlor closed at 10 o'clock p.m.
I can't answer that question though.
Okay, so if you can't answer that question, say the ice cream parlor closes at 10 o'clock. Everyone has to leave at that point, correct?
Based on my review of the record, that is not correct.
So nobody had to leave after 10 o'clock at night?
It's my review of the record that, at least on that night, they were not required to leave, no.
So you reviewed Christy Filatonova's deposition,
I am familiar with that deposition,
and
yes.
after 10 o'clock, she asked the plaintiff to leave the ice cream parlor.
Mr. Daly was asked to leave the physical store itself, but not the property. And that's why I can't say that they were told to leave.
You reviewed the deposition, and you stated you reviewed Christy Filatonova's deposition.
That's correct.
And in that deposition, she asked the plaintiff to leave the parking lot after she told him to leave the store, correct?
And then go to the sidewalk is my understanding, yes.
So the plaintiff was asked multiple times to leave Scooter's property.
That's not my understanding of the record, no.
I'd like to talk to you about the security system Mr. Simon had set up at Scooter's ice cream shop. During your review, you learned that Scooter's had cameras inside and outside their store.
That is correct.
And you learned that Scooter's had specifically 2 cameras outside their store.
2 misplaced cameras, yes.
There were 2 cameras outside the store, yes or no?
Yes.
The appearance of these cameras outside generally act as a deterrent to crimes, is that right?
If they're properly placed,
Your Honor,
which these were not.
Your Honor, permission to move the demonstrative in front of the witness? Is that the right question? No. Mr. Simpson, I'd like to go through this map with you, and first let's just talk about the cameras. These two cameras are where Scooters had cameras located outside their store, correct?
That is the general location of the cameras, as well as the indication of which direction they're pointing.
And again, you stated that you reviewed Ms. Fultanova's deposition,
I have reviewed it, yes.
and she indicated that the plaintiff was standing right here when he was attacked, is that right?
She indicated where she saw him standing on the sidewalk. However, she also mentioned that she was inside the store when he was attacked, and so from my understanding, she would not have been able to say exactly where he was standing when he was attacked.
But Ms. Fultanova was the only one there that evening, right?
No, in fact, the plaintiff, Mr. Daly, was there as long as with his friends, as well as the assailant that was there that night.
Ms. Fultanova was the only employee at Scooters that evening, correct?
Sadly, yes. Despite the volume of people that were there at the store, the defendant only had one employee there.
Okay, but you agree
Which
that
is part of the problem.
you agree that cameras act as a deterrent to many crimes.
No, only well-placed cameras can be a deterrent to a crime.
So in addition to having these two cameras outside, Scooters also put up a sign in the store that indicated that the property was under video surveillance, is that right?
It's my understanding that there was a sign in the general vicinity of these cameras that said that there was video surveillance. However, anyone who couldn't see the cameras would also not have been able to see the sign.
Now let's talk about the lights a little bit. Mr. Simon has 6 lights on his property.
I would have trouble characterizing it on the property. There are only 6 lights located directly on the parking lot.
So in the parking lot, there's 6 lights.
That's correct.
And so, but the sidewalk area down here was also well lit.
It's not my understanding that it was well lit. It's my understanding that the sidewalk actually had the lights off that night.
Mr. Simonstein, during your review of the records, you reviewed the police report.
Yes.
You're on permission to approach the witness. Mr. Simonstein, I'm handing you the police report from June 6, 2015. You recognize that document, right?
It is.
Your Honor, the defense offers this into evidence as trial exhibit 2. It has been stipulated authentic. States in. May I retrieve the document, Your Honor?
Okay.
Mr. Simonstein, you just testified that the sidewalk area was not well lit, correct?
Yes, it's my understanding. It's consistent with the police report. The police report indicates that the parking lot was well lit, and they reference the sidewalk as having ambient light. Anyone who knows anything about most city sidewalks knows that most sidewalks are supposed to have their own light. And in this particular situation, Mr. Daly specifically reported that the sidewalk lights were off. The officer's report indicates that there was only ambient light on the parking lot, which would indicate consistency with what Mr. Daly said, and that the sidewalk lights were off.
As we know, you were a police officer yourself for about 8 years. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you wrote police reports just like this one.
I have written police reports,
And you take
not just like that one.
when you wrote police reports during your time at Steelton PD, you took them very seriously.
I did, yes.
You tried to relay the most truthful information and describing the incident that occurred.
Yes.
Your Honor, permission to read part of the police report to the jury. Description of the scene. The officer arrived to a well-lit area. Although it was dark, as is customary for this time of year, the parking lot of Scooters was appropriately illuminated. The sidewalk area outside of Scooters had ambient light. No further questions.